Bitte, bitte lass mich. 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 Lass mich dein Sklave sein.
Devot, Lateinisch, unterwürfig.
There are several examples of psychological manipulation, often resulting in seemingly irrational behavior for uninvolved. These examples are especially now with the pandemic. Why do people run around with useless masks, follow nonsensical instructions, seemingly harm others for no reason? Why does no one defend himself? So many remain silent and even defend their own torture and the torture of their children. Often also used in my COVID-1984 videos as an attempt to explain the current situation.
Unterwürfige Menschen bezeichnet man noch als Sklaven oder Sklavinnen, Diener oder Dienerin.
The Stockholm Syndrome, the subject of the crappy Swedish TV movie Normal Stock from 2003, which over-dramatizes and partially falsifies the story, supposedly describes a psychological phenomenon in which victims build up a positive emotional relationship with the perpetrator to the point of sympathizing and cooperating with them. This can be traced back to Sweden 1973, the hostage-taking at Normal Stock, when 4 employees were taken hostage for 5 days during the bank robbery in Stockholm. And after termination, felt no hatred for the hostage-takers, asked for mercy for them, and even visited them in prison. From Blumhouse also exists the rather mediocre Canadian-American comedy Stockholm from 2018, only inspired by the events. And a 2020 book/documentary by David King. My reading tip on the next gracious lockdown by our current hostage-takers/police state. The 2001 German The Experiment was made from the 1999 novel Black Box by Mario Giordano, which itself is based on the 1971 Stanford prison experiment to study human behavior under conditions of confinement. In the original 1971 experiment, students were allowed to play prisoners and guards, and it was stopped after 6 or 4 planned days when one prisoner showed extreme stress reactions and some of the guards, what a twist, sadistic behavior. Who could have seen that coming? The escalation depicted in the movie, however, goes far beyond the events that actually took place. The initiators of the real experiment successfully sued against the subtitle based on a true event. There's also an US remake from 2010 with a slightly different plot, different characters and different ending. I consider both, as well as the so-called experiment itself, to be gimmicky, predictable and therefore uninteresting. The Wave is a 42-minute US TV movie from 1981. Morten Roos' more detailed bestseller of the same name, also 1981, was made after the script, based on the 1967 experiment The Third Wave, with which a teacher wanted to demonstrate to his students how the German population at the time could accept the actions of the Nazi regime. To do so, he displays an authoritarian military style of teaching, discipline, sitting up straight, standing while answering, establishes the community over the individual, with slogans, wave logo, wave greeting, badges and overseers. While everyone follows blindly and former outsiders suddenly feel powerful and accepted, one student has doubts that she also expresses, which is perceived as a threat by the others, who therefore try to intimidate her. Whereupon the teacher ends the experiment in which he shows them their new old leader. The important story serves as a warning so that people recognize fascist tendencies in a system in time and take countermeasures. Well, so much for theory. Since most people are obviously not capable of abstract thinking, it's not taught in schools, these are only conditioning institutions, and therefore did not notice that since March 2020 dictatorship after an enabling act again, the new, the wave aka Hitler greeting sign is simply the mask aka Merkel greeting sign. So dutifully put on a harmful slave mask without even questioning its symbolism, mutate from a deceptive sense of community to Corona's witnesses, and exchange basic rights for supposed security, line up like lemmings to get jabbed their golden shot, critics are silenced, and so on. In 2008, a German adaptation by Dennis Gansel was released, which has little in common with the original story except that this cinema production also looks like a TV production. The hypocritical, pre-framed social criticism which never really dares to do anything and in the end serves the usual silly cliches moves the story to the back then present-day Germany and is completely overloaded with stupid subplots. There is also an unnecessary gimmicky final with a shootout and a teacher arrested in slow motion with tears and affected looks, just as taught in the weekend film course. The Wrong Wave has also its own film-based book, in order to make a few bucks from uninformed people who don't look that closely. But is still Citizen Kane compared to the 2019, so far fortunately only 6-part German TV series with horrible soundtrack, We Are the Wave. We Are quite clumsy propaganda shit was produced by Dennis the Wrong Wave Gansel, also his crappy idea, and is based on the Mao Bible of our Green Party. I mean, of course, allegedly also on the wave. Sure. In the sheer unbearable cliché parade, the heroes are rich, spoiled, do-gooders, high school monkeys, where obviously the eco-fascists try, here in Germany we call them lovingly, uneducated, spoiled, work-shy, left-green, filthy Germany haters, to pull off the usual let's steal a known name, because otherwise no one would be interested in our fascist comic crap. And quite openly, because in favor of actual government politics and presumably financed by them, smear campaign against only in the media existing Nazis. I've never met one and I live here almost 50 years. And the alleged political opponent, in this case the system-installed controlled opposition AfD party, short for Alternative for Germany, presented as NFD. This 24/7 in all media, so that half-awakened sheeple think the apartheid state supporting Goldman Sachs troop is really an alternative. The series openly propagates, since the end result justifies the means, serious crimes against people with different opinions. Coincidentally, only those that contradict the current government narrative, and sold as a consumption and capitalism criticism from the perspective of a 5-year-old. So really anarchistic. And their crimes, of course actions, fatally remind of organizations infiltrated by the regime with pretend eco-animal or human protection. With their stale wannabe earth protection agenda, they try to influence foremost young people, I guess. Unsuccessful, of course, because as usual it's written in a laughable, simple-minded way. The dialogues are obviously written by a school dropout and staged as boring as it gets. Eugene Ionesco's brilliant 1959 episodist play Rhinoceros describes the transformation of an entire French town, with the exception of the protagonist Beringer, into a herd of rhinos. In Tom O'Harrigan's 1974 same-named comedy set in the US, Wilder and Mosel were already in Mel Brooks' brilliant The Producers in 1967, here in Germany known as Springtime for Hitler. The audience don't get to see any rhinos, only hinted at. There are several changes to the original dialogue, also the names of the main actors, and for reasons there's an edit dream sequence. Instead of this horrible junk, I definitely recommend the original story or one of the stage plays. The original is among others about responsibility and system thinking. Beringer notices the changes in his environment and wants to do something, while others, for example, try to stop him, since he can't do anything about the transformations anyway and should just ignore them, like the majority already does. All the people around him are trapped in their system and can't get rid of their way of thinking or do any self-reflection. Due to their system thinking, also the language itself loses its sense. For system people, logical is in fact illogical and wrong, at least in my system. The feeling of being the only normal person in a world gone mad is currently held by those whose entire environment puts on, for no reason, stupid looking diapers on their faces, so kind of turn into rhinos. Also babble something about supposedly deadly diseases, despite being already proven wrong by the missing victims / over mortality, and also for no reason let themselves be regularly treated with experimental poison and sterilization injections for the rest of their lives, although these are in the best case simply placebos but often harmful and deadly. And these deaths are then seriously attributed to the invented disease instead of the real poison injection. In 1976, the US TV drama with William Shatner, The 10th Level, is about a study of a psychology professor who wants to find out why people like the Nazis, as if there had ever been other villains, were willing to just follow orders and do nasty things to others. The movie is inspired by the 1961 Obedience to Authority research of Stanley Milgram and his 1974 book. Also reenacted in 1970 at the Munich Max Planck Institute, documented as Abraham N. Experiment. In the Milgram experiment, the willingness of average persons is tested to obey authoritarian instructions even if they are in direct contradiction to their conscience. Very good visualized in Henry Verneuil's 1979 brilliant classic I as in Icarus. See also the JFK special. And this also applies to Michael Almer-Ryder's 2015 US drama biography Experimenter, the Stanley Milgram story. Both of course as good as Unknown. Experimenter ran almost only at festivals and appeared here quite and secretly on DVD and Blu-ray. The peer pressure phenomenon and other behavior experiments are also mentioned here, and even the production of The 10th Level, of which Milgram was apparently not a fan. The basic experiment, later also varied, consisted of a teacher following instructions from an experimenter. The guys in the white coats who, for example, when asked, say they take full responsibility. Giving electric shocks to a student in case of wrong answers increased their intensity after each further mistake. Both the experimenter, the student, and the electric shocks were fake. However, this was hidden from the actual subjects, the teachers. So they had to assume they were inflicting real pain to the students, which a large percentage had shockingly little problems with. And 65% even followed through to the end. See also desk culprits and nowadays most of the real so-called teachers / Coronazis, aka the cowards, from order followers to perpetrators, who watch and say nothing as their proteges slowly suffocate on the shitty masks, not to mention the test stick Gestapo and the vaccination whisperers. Their superiors / current junta, whose godmother already times her installed judge dummies to the roll call, of course, to dinner, presumably to make them an offer which they can't refuse, are to be seen soon in their own court drama / remake. One true